She takes her opportunity. Alexandra Eala, she reeled off the opening set in double quick time. Fair play, Magdalena Frech. She came back, took that second set.
Okay, let me tell you something. 3 weeks ago, people were writing Alexandra Eala off on clay. Not quietly either. Loudly. Confidently. With statistics to back them up. 3 tournaments in Europe, 3 first or second round exits, and a career clay record that sat at 14 wins and 23 losses heading into Rome. The doubters had a case. They had receipts. And then she walked onto the Pietrangeli court at the Italian Open and completely dismantled that entire argument in 2 hours and 15 minutes of some of the most emotionally charged tennis you will ever watch. Before we get into what happened today, you have to understand the weight she was carrying into this match, because context is everything in sport, and without context, a scoreline is just numbers. Eala's European clay season had been a slow accumulation of heartbreak. Stuttgart ended in the round of 64 against Fernandez. Madrid was worse, a brutal 60-61 dismantling at the hands of Marins that left nothing to interpretation. No moral victories, no close calls. Just a clinical loss on a surface where she looked like a completely different player from the one who had been causing chaos on hard courts all season long. And between those 2 losses sat the Lin's defeat against Ostapenko, a match where she led 42 and then 51, 2 separate moments where the finish line was in sight, and both times the match slipped through her fingers. The number that haunted her from that day was 0. 0% on second serve points. Every single second serve she hit in that match came back at her like a weapon. Ostapenko read her, attacked her, and punished her for it relentlessly. That 0% was not just a statistic. It was a diagnosis. It told the story of exactly where her clay game was broken. So, what do you do after a loss like that? If you're Alexandra Eala, you get on a plane to Mallorca, you walk through the gates of the Rafa Nadal Academy, and you hand that diagnosis to the best clay court coaching staff on the planet, and you say, "Fix this." For 7 days, she drilled. Not just the second serve, but everything connected to it. The footwork, the spin patterns, the positioning after the serve, the recovery when rallies went long. Clay court tennis is not just a surface adjustment. It's a complete rewiring of how you think about every single point. And when she landed in Rome, nobody outside her team really knew how much had changed. The first set answered that question immediately and violently. 6-0. She bageled Magdalena Frech, a former world number 22 with WTA titles to her name and victories over top 10 players in her career, in 35 minutes. Not a tight 6-1 where you can point to a couple of unlucky moments. A bagel. 6 consecutive games. 0 response from the other side of the net. Think about what it takes to do that on clay, of all surfaces, against a veteran who has played this game for 2 decades and knows every trick in the book. You have to be playing almost perfect tennis. Your serve has to land, your returns have to bite, and your patterns have to be so clean that your opponent cannot find the rhythm that clay court players depend on. Eala gave Frech nothing to work with. She broke serve, held, broke again, held again, broke a 3rd time, closed the set. 35 minutes.
Done.
The Pietrangeli court, one of the most storied venues in tennis history, surrounded by 18 marble statues that have watched every legend of the sport pass through its red surface for nearly a century, was witnessing something it had not expected from a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines. But here is where the story gets complicated, because sport never stays simple for long. Veterans do not disappear after one bad set. They recalibrate. They survive. Frech came back in the second set with a completely different approach. First serve started landing with more authority. Her backhand found the corners. She moved up in the return position and started attacking Eala's toss earlier, which is exactly the adjustment that exposed the second. Serve vulnerability in Linz. The match that had felt one-sided suddenly had a pulse. Eala's first serve percentage dipped. The receiving points that had been so clean in the first set became contested. 6-3, Frech took the second set, and just like that, the match was level. Now I want you to sit with that moment for a second, because this is where most young players fall apart. You win a set 6-love in 35 minutes. You feel invincible, and then the experienced player on the other side of the net adjusts and takes the next set relatively comfortably, and the psychological gravity of the situation lands on you all at once. You realize the match is not over. You realize experience matters. You realize that the clay court demons that followed you from Stuttgart and Madrid and Linz are still circling. And for a player with a history Eala had on this surface in 2026, that moment between the second and third set could have been the beginning of another painful exit. It was not. She walked to her chair, she sat down, she breathed, and she came back for the third set with something in her eyes that the cameras caught, but words struggled to capture. Call it resolve. Call it the Mallorca week crystallizing into mental clarity exactly when she needed it most. The third set was point by point, game by game, the kind of clay court chess match that the surface was built for. She broke early. She held. The score moved through its stages with both players fighting for every single point. Frech refused to collapse the way she had in the first set. This was a genuine contest between a young player trying to close out the biggest clay court win of her season and a seasoned professional who had been in these moments 100 times and knew how to make them uncomfortable. At 5-4, serving for the match, the Pietrangeli crowd fell into that particular silence that only old tennis venues produce. The kind of silence that feels heavy. The marble statues stood there the way they always do, unmoved, unhurried, witnesses to 100 years of moments exactly like this one. And Alexandra Eala served out the match. 6-4. The handshake at the net, the look to the sky, the wave to the crowd.
Done.
Now let me give you the number that changes the entire meaning of this victory, because a scoreline tells you who won and a stat sheet tells you why, but one number in particular tells you what this win actually represents. 68%. That was her second serve win rate today against Frech. 68%. Take that number and hold it next to 0, which was her second serve win rate against Ostapenko and Linz. The shot that completely betrayed her, that left her exposed and vulnerable on the surface she was already struggling with, the shot that she carried to Mallorca as the single biggest problem to solve, produced a 68% conversion rate today against a player who specifically targeted it. That is not a coincidence. That is 7 days of work at the Nadal Academy showing up exactly when and where it needed to. The second serve did not just stop being a liability. It became a weapon. It won her points she would have lost a month ago. It kept rallies on her terms instead of Frech's. And in clay court tennis, where every rally is a negotiation, having a functional second serve is the difference between surviving and controlling. The break point numbers told the same story from a different angle. 6 breaks of serve from 12 opportunities. Half of every chance she earned, she converted. Frech converted 3 from 9. What that gap represents is not just efficiency. It is volume. Eala created 12 break point opportunities across 3 sets, which means she was putting Frech under pressure constantly, consistently, relentlessly. Clay court players survive on rhythm and confidence in their serve, and Eala disrupted both throughout the entire match. Total points, 82-75. A 7-point margin that sounds modest until you remember that 2 hours of tennis at this level produces margins measured in single digits, and those single digits represent the finest distinctions between 2 highly skilled competitors. Across every service metric, every receiving metric, every category that clay court analysts actually care about, Eala led. And she did all of this while carrying 14 losses in 23 career clay matches into the venue, while carrying 3 consecutive European clay exits into the draw, while carrying the specific psychological weight of the Madrid loss just 10 days earlier. The Mallorca week is the story within the story here, and it deserves its own chapter. When she flew thereafter, Madrid, nobody made a big announcement. No press conference, no social media campaign, no dramatic declaration of intent. She just went to work. The Rafa Nadal Academy is not just famous because of the name attached to it. It is famous because it has produced results on clay that no other training environment consistently replicates. The methodology is specific. The coaching is detailed. The courts themselves, the conditions, the repetition, everything is designed to turn clay court weaknesses into strengths through sheer accumulated precision. And what Eala brought there was a very specific problem with a very measurable solution. They fixed the spin rate. They worked on the placement. They drilled the disguise so that the second serve stopped telegraphing itself the way it had against Ostapenko. And when she walked back onto clay in Rome 1 week later, the first Real test produced 68%. Now let's talk about what comes next, because this victory is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of a stretch that is going to define the entire second half of Eala's 2026 season. In the round of 64, she faces Wang Xinyu of China, and if you have been following this season closely, that name lands with a specific weight. Auckland, January, semi-final, 5-7, 5-7, 6-4. A 3-set loss that ended her tournament and that she has been carrying around for 4 months. The rematch is here. Not on hard courts in New Zealand in January, but on red clay in Rome in May, with a completely different Eala. One who has just bageled a former top 20 player in the opening set of a WTA 1000 match. The psychological dynamics of that rematch are fascinating. Wang beat her when she was riding the momentum of a hard court season, before clay had exposed anything, before the losses had accumulated. She faces her now on the surface, where Eala has just proven something important about herself. Beyond Wang, if everything goes right, Elena Rybakina waits in the round of 32. World number 2, reigning Australian Open champion, one of the most complete players in the world on any surface. That match would be a measuring stick of the highest order. But Rybakina only matters if Wang falls first. And Wang only entered the conversation because Frech fell today. This is how clay court seasons are built, match by match, lesson by lesson, opponent by opponent, 12 days before Roland Garros begins on May 18th. Every win between now and Paris is not just points and ranking progress. It is rhythm. It is confidence. It is muscle memory deposited into the bank before the biggest clay court tournament on the calendar opens its gates. The story of Alexandra Eala's 2026 European clay season was supposed to be a cautionary tale by now. 3 exits, a declining clay record, a hard court specialist hitting the ceiling on a slower surface. That was the narrative being assembled. That was the ceiling being constructed around her. And today, on the most beautiful court in Italian tennis history, surrounded by marble witnesses who have seen everything and forgotten nothing, she walked in, dropped a bagel in 35 minutes, survived the storm in the second set, and closed out the third with the composure of someone who had been preparing for exactly this moment for the last 7 days. 63, 6-4. They said she cannot win on clay. Today in Rome, on Pietrangeli, she made every single one of them look ridiculous. Wang is next. Roland Garros is 12 days away. And the girl from the Philippines is just getting started.